Hi everyone. We are ready to start now. In case more people join, we'll have a description of the workshop in the chat now. So we've got Pooja Nair with us for the first workshop of the day. Thanks, Pooja, for joining us. Uh, Before we begin, I would request you all to to just fill in the poll that we'll be sharing on the screen right now. The motive behind us asking these questions is just to get a sense of how much impact the workshops and discussions that you are participating in have had. So it would be really helpful if you can just answer the question here, and you would also see a post workshop poll at the end of the workshop. Before I hand over to Pooja, a little bit of introduction about her. Pooja Nair has been part of the non-profit sector for over a decade. She has worked variously as a researcher, documentation consultant, trainer, and now as an independent therapist. Pooja has an MPhil from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences and has worked in the areas of life skills, gender, sexuality, violence, and child sexual abuse. She has also worked with adolescents on life skills development. She's currently working on her PhD and is a consultant therapist and faculty at Mariwala Health Initiatives Queer Affirmative Counseling Practice Certificate course. Today's workshop by Pooja would look into understanding how mental health, gender, and sexuality are connected and what the impact of these factors have on our mental health day to day. So, over to Pooja, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Shweta, and everyone at It's Okay to Talk, and Mann, Mela for inviting me today. I'm hoping that in this 1 hour, we are able to cover some ground in terms of understanding the connection between gender, sexuality, and mental health. Um, is this poll going to stay on screen? I can still see it.
It should have gone
Oh,
now.
okay, it's gone now. All right. So I will just start. I will share a PowerPoint because it helps to just stick. It helps us to stick to the time and structure. So please give me a few seconds to do that. All right. So our broad objectives for today from this workshop, even though we do understand that 1 hour may not really be enough to fully understand gender, sexuality, and mental health. However, it's always possible to get some of these very important conversations going. It's also possible to get some of these thought processes what I have in the next hour. I've just outlined a few broad objectives. I'm hoping to cover some of this here. One is, of course, that gender and sexuality are axes of marginalization. I mean, the very reason that we need to talk about it is it's not about personal preferences or quirks or desires, but desires that are ranked hierarchically in society, that there are punishments for desiring the wrong person or being in the wrong body, whatever is wrong according to society. There are costs and consequences to living lives that do not conform. Gender and sexuality are axes of marginalization, and therefore they do perpetuate inequality. It to also then understand that inequality would mean discrimination. It could mean a range of consequences which then impact a person's mental health. And therefore, gender and sexuality is a mental health issue as well. And the third thing is, I'm hoping to also just raise a few thoughts in terms of what is it that individuals can do in order to respond to this two matters of gender and sexuality, if we understand it as social, and if we understand it as a matter of social justice and about removal of inequality. It means that each one of us will have to do our part. Each one of us will have to think about what it is that we can do in our life, see how badly it affects all those who do not conform. So I'm just going to now start with an exercise, and I would urge everyone to participate. Uh, Okay, so what I'd like you to do is if those who are comfortable, to please close your eyes and just follow my voice, because I'll be reading out a scenario here. And those who are not comfortable only listening, please do follow the text on screen, whichever modality is comfortable. Please feel free to choose. You can close your eyes and listen if that's possible. So I'm just going to read a scenario, and let's see where that takes us. Okay, so imagine a time 1000 years ago, or maybe 1000 years in future. You live in a country of say 10 million people. 95% people here are homosexual. Most of them marry people of the same gender. The average age of marriage may be 22 to 28 years, around that, and most families have one or two children. The state insurance covers use of medical technology for childbearing. Parents raise their children on storybooks of love between Cinderella and Snow White and bring them up to become normal, healthy, homosexual adults. Religious leaders promote homosexuality and condemn any heterosexual behavior as sinful. There are laws punishing any kind of heterosexual conduct. Medical foundations are putting in millions of dollars to promote research aimed at finding and eliminating of the straight gene or the heterosexual gene, and to find a cure for heterosexuality. Now, imagine you are a 32-year-old woman or a man in this world, in this place, who has always been attracted to people of the opposite gender. Despite several attempts at getting rid of these feelings, you have intense, incurable inclination towards persons of the gender opposite to yours. You work in a hospital as a counselor that has a policy against hiring of such perverts. In this institution, most people are married to people of the same gender, or have steady relationships. The institution gives insurance cover and all partner benefits to homosexuals, whether they are in marriage or other forms of partnerships. You've heard about reports on the internet that there are as many as 5% people in the country who are straight or who are heterosexual, but you personally haven't met anyone else. You haven't met any other heterosexual person. You suspect that there would be others, but they all have to be in the closet. They all have to be hidden in order, due to the fear of being found out, just like you. The only place where you see heterosexuals is sometimes in movies, where they are used for comic relief. Yeah, so that's the scenario. Now, the first question to ask all of you is, do you think you would be at a disadvantage in a society like this? And I'm hoping that the chat box can be used to write a yes or a no. Do you think you would be at a disadvantage? Okay, yes, maybe. Okay, okay, perhaps, yes, and perhaps. Okay, suppose we were to lead with yes, because you are living in a place where, religious, medical, and educational and other workplaces are all against you. Let's see what some of this would look like. Now, the other question I want to ask is, number one, what are the challenges you would face in such a society? And if we could all also respond to the first question here in the chat box, what are the challenges you would face in such a society, assuming you have said yes, that it would be disadvantages? Okay, family and peers would not accept you. Rejection by society, no medical or legal support. Right. Fear of being attacked. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So being at the receiving end of violence, isolation, no social sanction, restricted access to services, no social support, fear of being found out. Circumstances can lead to disturbance of mental health. Yeah. To live double life. Fear of being viewed as abnormal. Yeah. Yeah. Imagine the first impression or the first thing that people think of when they meet you, or when they know, if they happen to know about you being heterosexual, is wondering about you as being abnormal or, you know, different in a bad way. To be disadvantages, unfair society that has limitations on. Yeah, actually, you're right about that, Madhuri, and that's exactly what we are trying to sort of understand here. So, disadvantage, as in, if you were to live in a society like this that does not value you, your who you are turns to be a huge source of stress, not because of who you are, and that's exactly what we're trying to build towards. Being told your choice of partner is wrong, yes, and then that being continually corrected. Okay, so then let's go to the second question here. Which social institutions, therefore, so we have had we have some understanding of what are the challenges. Which social institutions could be barriers? Family, workplace. Absolutely. Yeah. Almost all social institutions, especially marriage. Yes, absolutely. Hospitals, educational. Yes. So your access to healthcare is affected. Your access to education is affected, and access to education getting affected has implications also for then access to livelihood options. If you are, if for example, if bullying, if as a child you are found out to be a heterosexual child, and then there's bullying, and then you can't access education anymore, it affects your chances at what jobs you might be able to access as an adult. Very often we have tried to reformulate dropout as being pushed out of the educational system for the same reason. Schools, colleges, yeah, would bully, might not be explicit, and the fear would continue. Yeah. So, Soham, I think that's a very important point you've added, because not all forms of discrimination would be very overt. Sometimes living under the fear of being found out itself is a huge everyday stressor. Every day of being vigilant so that you're not found out, because if you're found out, then there are consequences. The judiciary, the executive, legislature, yes. So no recognition of rights, no protection from discrimination. Basically, all, as someone said, all institutions would be against you, including social and sort of informal and formal kinds of institutions. Absolutely. Medical workers wouldn't know how to treat problems. That's true. That's true. In fact, the trouble here is that, not only does the medical worker not know how to treat you, but the medical worker has already labeled you abnormal. The medical worker is seeing you as sickness, and not what you have. For example, you land up at the hospital with a severe belly ache, but the person already thinks of you as abnormal. You are there for your belly ache, but then they want to cure you of your homosexuality, because that is there in the books as abnormal, that is there in our minds as abnormal. So what you really need attention for also will never get attended to. Being refused treatment. Yeah. Right. So challenges on all fronts. You also see that some of this you might be able to access, but only through hiding who you are. If you still have to go to the doctor, you take your partner along, you might tell the doctor that this is my friend, my hostel mate or my roommate who has just come. So you might have to hide in order to access, but that is so fragile, because the minute it is found out, you lose your access. The same thing happens with families also. I mean, we'll come to that in a little bit. So let's move to the third question. Therefore, then what would be so what would your emotional world look like, being a heterosexual in a country where heterosexuality is criminalized and there's prejudice and there's stigma? What would your emotional world look like? What would be your feelings? What words come to mind if you're thinking of your inner world? Feeling ostracized, feeling unloved, unwanted, yeah. Low self esteem, loneliness, anxiety, depression, fear, yeah, feeling anxious, internalizing of hatred. That's also a very important one. The world tells you you're bad, and after a point, you start believing that. Incoherent is the only word, right? Okay. Yeah. Not feeling belonged. Yeah. Of course, the isolation, the abject isolation. Isolation, loneliness. Pressure to assimilate. I think that's also a very important one. Queer people, LGBTQ persons live lives of constantly trying to self-correct. I mean, there's also the practitioners, the psychiatrist or the psychologist who tries to correct you, quote unquote, correct you. But there's also all kinds of self-correction behaviors, self-censoring behaviors, so that you fit and so that you're not discriminated against. So a lot of pressure to assimilate. Yeah, self-directed anger, sense of guilt, shame. Absolutely, guilt and shame very strongly present, and for no fault of yours. Helplessness, yes. I think this was a very important one, helplessness, because you really you don't know what to do about it, because it's really not you. It's how society and how our ideas of what is normal, abnormal, what needs to be treated, and what is natural, what is unnatural. It's all these ideas that make everything difficult, and you are actually fighting social rules. You're fighting social norms, and that just makes the whole you just really, the sense of what you're up against essentially would lead to a lot of helplessness. Okay, so thank you again, all of you, for responding to the third question, to all the three questions, and I hope that we have some understanding of the landscape, so to speak, of what a heterosexual person in this case is going through in a world that values homosexuality. Okay, so here is I mean, all of you also came up with a very good list, and this is just think of this as a it's not an exhaustive list by any means. In terms of challenges, having no friends, double life, fear of losing job, violence, all of these came up in your responses as well. This is just a putting together a summary of what comes up. Institutions, again, all institutions, including media and the and side disciplines and the mental health establishment as a whole. Feelings and emotions. I mean, again, the list is so, um, it's a tragic list. Oh shit! It stopped. I'm so sorry. I'll just do this again. Just give me a few seconds. I don't understand what is happening right now. Okay. So what we need to therefore come, oh God, it's happening again. Can I just send this PowerPoint to someone?
Yeah, Pooja, if you can send it to me, I'll share it.
Okay, because I really don't understand what's happening right now with
We
the
can see
speeding.
the screen though.
But it's speeding, isn't it? The slides are just rolling.
Just send it to me. I'll
Okay. Whom should I email it to?
Shweta. Shweta.
Okay.
Let's send it again.
Could you please tell me your email ID? I don't think I have it, Shweta. Okay, thank you. Okay, I've sent it to you. I'm really sorry to all those who are attending. Oh, thank you so much. Okay. Uh, I think we were on slide 7. Yes. Thank you. Okay. So I think it was Madhavi who said in the chat that if the orientation per se or the sexual identity per se is not what seems to be the problem. But yeah, and that's exactly the point here. When we speak of LGBTQ mental health, it's not about identities being a pathology or people and their desires being a pathology or people and their bodies being a pathology, but how just the mere fact that society does not value it leads to all the stressors that we just talked about. I mean, we saw the third column of the emotions and the feelings that a person from the community has to go through, and it's hardly then a surprise that there are mental health implications. I mean, I would be surprised if there aren't any mental health challenges in this space where you're experiencing so much distress because of how society views you, how you are stigmatized. And therefore, as the slide also says here, the major takeaway is that distress is socially located. The source of the distress is not within me. It's introduced by negative social attitudes. And in the exercise where you were imagining the scenario, we did not change your orientation. If I'm sure there are queer persons also who are listening to me right now, but for the the cis heterosexuals here, we did not change your heterosexuality. All we said that is that you are in a place radicalizes it, and then just to imagine then what life would be like. So that's the whole sort of point of understanding gender, sexuality, and mental health, that there is so much of social embedded in these issues. There is so much of what is normal and what is abnormal, what is natural, what is unnatural, all of these defined simply by what society holds to be valuable and and sees as normal. And that leads to all kinds of stressors. Can we go to the next one, please? And one more. Okay, so here is a visual sort of an understanding of what are the mental health challenges that someone from the community, someone from the LGBTQ community might be going through. Right on top is the stressor of coming out. I mean, no heterosexual person has ever had to walk up to another or to go to their family and say that I'm heterosexual. With the body they're born in, has had to go and say, well, I'm a woman. I have never had to come out to anyone saying I'm a woman and please treat me as a woman, please see me as a woman. Coming out is a stressor if you do not conform to what is society's idea of normal. And it's a constant stressor because you have to every time come out to different sets of people. So coming out is also a continuous stressor. And the other thing to remember about coming out is coming out has consequences. It's not simply me telling you that my favorite color is green. I tell you I'm lesbian, and that's going to lead to all kinds of responses from you. It could range from, say, some form of acceptance to some kind of passive sort of, stepping away from my life, or it could lead to consequences like violence. It could lead to consequences like discrimination, which is why coming out is a constant stressor in lives. There is self-acceptance, which is a problem because the world, as we saw, is continuously telling you that you're not okay. And how do you then internalize? Someone talked about internalizing of that hatred, right? And that's the problem with self-acceptance. Then it's self-acceptance is hard because nobody else sees you as valid, as normal, and as deserving of respect and dignity. So self-acceptance, there is of course invisibility. Couples could be together for the longest time and still be viewed as friends, or have to invisibilize themselves in order to be safe. So take up maybe accommodations as cousins, because the minute the landlord or the landlady finds out you are queer, you could be kicked out. So there's invisibility for years and years of being together and still nobody knowing that you are a couple. Then of course discrimination and harassment is something that unfortunately happens in various spaces. And what's most sort of tragic in queer lives is that families, a space that we usually take for granted as this lovely nurturing space where we are safe at all times and we are taken care of, families end up being extremely hostile spaces for queer people. and there's a lot of discrimination there. There's also then, of course, in every other space, be it where you stay in your neighborhood, be it at workplaces, be it in public spaces, be it within the law that also discriminates. And of course, the Trans Act that has also come into force is a huge source of stress, because now, because of, again, I hope you're also able to read up on why the Trans Act is problematic. It has taken away the power of self-determination from the community, and it has placed that power in the hands of experts. So now only a doctor or an expert can tell me what my gender is and whether they. So there's discrimination and harassment. Finding love is hard, each other and each other's identities. As there is no kind friend or kind relative who wants to listen to perhaps your relationship challenges and might help, the same way that, in marriages and all, the whole society is invested in keeping the two people together, and therefore there's a lot of social support. That may never happen. And of course, all of these stresses leading to, it just seems a foregone conclusion that mental health implications will be part of the deal because of the everyday stresses. And that's the other thing to remember when talking about gender, sexuality, and mental health, that because these are axes of marginalization, there is no start and finish date to the stressors. It's not going to magically stop the day perhaps COVID is eradicated, or it's not going to magically stop when, in 2 years' time, or by 2024, or by 2030, because it is social and it is so pervasive that it will require continuous effort, because the stress is every day. There are it might not always be the case that there are these spectacular incidents of violence and discrimination. There is a lot of everyday marginalization, everyday discrimination, and everyday inequality experienced by those on the margins. The next slide, please. Can this film be played? It's a YouTube link embedded in the PowerPoint. So I just have a short film to illustrate the same point that I was making of how distress is social.
So the first time when I realized that people are not accepting me for what I am was at the age of 6, when I didn't like to wear frocks. मतलब मैंने कभी बताया नहीं उनको कि I feel like a man. There was no space where I would stand up and say that this is how I feel. And then when I came to all girls school, बहुत difficult था मेरे लिए. When I told my mom कि क्या हम इनको बोल सकते हैं कि मैं pants पहन के आऊँ. My college life went and I really got involved with this girl. I was insanely in love with that person. So when I asked, how do you see this relationship? She was like, why are you talking about all this? All this is waste of time. I'm like, how is it waste of time? Why are trans men not an option? Everything has to be inside the closet. It's suffocating. And then I got my first anxiety attack. People just say कि blatantly ये पागलपन है. It's nothing that I'm enjoying. I'm going through dysphoria. I am dysphoric. I hate my body. What I'm feeling with myself is what people are not accepting. The problem is outside. The problem is not inside. And then I was diagnosed that you have anger issues, you have anxiety issues. I will. I don't have anxiety issues because I have some chemical problems. It's because the structural fight is like this. Then 2016, I shifted to Pune for my master's in clinical psychology. On the day one, I said I identify myself as a man and my name is Aryan. My classmates, my teachers, never anybody came and asked me that why and what is this. And this friend of mine, this girl gave me a lot of confidence. All her family members accepted me for what I am. They never asked me what's her birth name. So after this, I got this confidence. Yeah, I think I can tell my parents also. And I told them that I identify as a man. So I was telling that I know that it's going to be tough for you. He tells me, wait, what society thinks has never been my problem. If you say you are a man, you are son for me from today. I will come with you to gender certification, and he had come with me. My mother also told me, this is your happiness, this is my happiness. Privileged, blessed, no matter what synonym you give to this. But this is the kind of love that I got. Now this is acceptance.
Thank you so much. Just a brief video there again to illustrate the connection between individual distress and social factors for it, which is the case when it comes to gender sexuality. There's nothing personal about gender sexuality if I'm going to be punished for my gender or sexuality, or gender and sexuality. Then it's no longer a personal affair. It is social, it is political. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. I'm just going to run through, keeping an eye on the time as well, just run through some bit of do's and don'ts, so that we can, all of us who have gathered here today and who want to perhaps do better, or to do, or to start sort of thinking critically along these lines and contribute to social justice, just something to get us started on this path. And the first, therefore, on the list is to not make any assumptions. So what would that look like? For example, I have not assumed that those of you who are listening to me, all of you are, not trans, or all of you are heterosexual. I make no such assumptions. So first of all, to not assume that everyone around you is, what society sees as normal. The second thing is to also not make assumptions about what does a particular identity mean. It would so it would have to, you would have to think about, what are my assumptions about people in the community? What do I think about people in the community? And how might those assumptions stop me from being truly supportive and accepting? The second point here, it would be important to be careful of language. And why this is important is there's a lot of language that exists which stigmatizes. Yeah, I am sure if all of us were to start brainstorming and create a list of stigmatizing words, create a list of shaming words used against the LGBTQ community, I'm sure we would be able to build quite a list pretty quickly, because those are the words that we know. But do we know words that are used by the community for themselves? Do we know words that have been reclaimed? Do we know the terms that the community is using that are free from shame and stigma? And to know those words would be very, very necessary. For example, the word queer now is used largely as an umbrella term for anyone who does not fit society's idea of normal gender and sexuality. And queer was a term that was earlier a pejorative term, was a term that was used to shame, but the community has reclaimed it and says that now we choose to self-identify as queer. The same way that, in the women's movement spaces, words like slut and yes, the slut has been reclaimed to sort of de-link it from the shame and stigma that comes with it. So to find out the correct terms that the community is using, Make your spaces, which is physical spaces, more inclusive. Keep books, films, posters, because what we don't realize it is a lot of imagery is very cis heterosexual imagery out there. You know, even a clock might have a man and a woman holding hands and walking into the sunset. A poster about inspiration and life, and it could be just a simple sort of, you know, motivational poster, but that might have a man, a woman, a child, a girl child, a boy child, and a dog. I mean, what is that if not heteronormativity? So what we see as default could very simply be normative about social rules and about this is heterosexual married family. So how can we sort of understand that and start making spaces more inclusive? The fourth point here is to not fall into the trap of stereotypes and myths. So in your imagination, is lesbian a woman who is masculine only? Are there other, you know, so are you only functioning on that stereotype? Do you think trans people are a certain way? A trans man is like that, trans woman. So is your understanding of the LGBTQ community based on how they describe themselves, or is it based on your stereotypes and assumptions? Is a question to ask. The next slide, please. Right, now here the first point is very important, because there is no gender sexuality matter that is out there. All of us experience gender, all of us experience sexuality. It has to start from within, because we also internalize ideas of what is good sexuality, what is bad sexuality, what is the right kind of gender, what is the wrong kind of gender, what is the right way to live your gender. I mean, for example, women are constantly told to cover up, dress a particular way, sit a particular way, walk a particular way. So we've all been trained. We have all, it's like going to the same school that tells you how to be the right kind of woman, how to be the right kind of man. And therefore to realize that gender and sexuality are very much part of who we are. It's within us as much as it is outside in society. So working with one's own discomfort first would be absolutely important, perhaps non-negotiable, if you want to work here in this space. Keep educating yourself and others around you. There are many ways to do this. Attend workshops, read books, watch films. If you work in organizations, it might also be important to train other staff in the organization to be open. What if a gender non-conforming person is to access your services, and perhaps you see yourself as very accepting and affirming and all of that, but there is someone else in the office who is not treating them properly. So training everyone, speaking about sensitivity and respectful treatment around the organization would also be very necessary. It's not only important to create your own isolated bubbles of being okay and being respectful, but to also have these conversations around all around in the organization. Respond to anti-LGBTQ behavior. What do you do? What happens when you hear jokes that are derogatory? What happens when you hear jokes that are insulting, or there is bullying or derogatory comments about the community when they're not present? So maybe there is no queer person in your midst. It's just 5 people discussing, but talking about the community in derogatory ways. What would be your response then? So responding to anti-LGBTQ behavior is an important sort of stand to take in order to be more affirming and accepting. The next one, please, slide. Thank you. So here, this is something for, again, organizations to think about, to have a robust and responsive anti-discrimination policy, which would also include grievance redressal. So it's important not only to say that this is how we must create open and respectful spaces for the community, but if there are instances of discrimination, if there are instances of harassment, what would be your response? Is it going to be just hushed up the way a lot of Me Too instances are hushed up in organizations, or would you want to respond to all instances of harassment, and that also leading to safer spaces? in organizations. Listen and support LGBTQ persons in their difficult times and participate in the happy times as well. It's not as if, people in the community are only living abject lives with no causes for celebration. They also feel happiness and joy in addition to being discriminated or feeling lonely and sad. And are you there participating in all these moments and in then supporting them to live full lives? Collect resources and share them with other people. So having a sort of a resource which has multiple kinds of things that people community can access. Those who want to understand can also access. Now, for example, the Mariwala Health Initiative website has a tab called QACP. It's again a repository of all kinds of videos and writings which help understand challenges in the community better and LGBTQ mental health better. So are you also gathering resources that can be shared? Are you also connecting LGBTQ people to support groups? Now, it's not enough that you support someone in your individual capacity, but when you realize that marginalization is a much bigger challenge than you or I, we will realize that we have to access as many support systems as possible. And then LGBTQ community is a very, very important support system there. It's because so many of us, as we saw in that exercise, are isolated. We have no way of knowing, even in the inversion exercise, right? You have not met another person like you. And that's actually the reality. So many queer people have gone years and decades of their life not having met a single person. So please do not go by the impression you are getting from, say, metros like a Delhi or a Bombay. Even in Bombay, it's possible. In fact, I was just recently in conversation with someone who has never met anyone else from the community, who does not know anyone else from the community. So the loneliness and the isolation is so deep that connecting with community becomes an important part of providing support. The next one, please. Next slide. Right. This would be, again, a very important value to hold on to value, to uphold the value of self-determination. A person is who they identify as. You do not go by the privilege that people have of not self-identifying. Yeah, I mean, why do they have to identify is not a question. I mean, they have to identify because otherwise, because look at all the other people who are cis and heterosexual who do not have the pressure to self-identify, who are seen as normal and accepted for who they are. So valuing self-determination is something that we can cultivate by believing and referring to identity. So if someone were to come out to you, the first question to ask is not, are you sure? Perhaps the first thing to say would be, thank you for trusting me, because really coming out would lead to all kinds of consequences, as I said. And if they have felt safe enough to come out to you, how about just thanking them for their trust? Because it must have taken a lot for a person to come out and take that risk with you as a person. And the last point is extremely important. Again, confidentiality. Maintaining the confidentiality of a queer and trans person is very necessary, because this is a matter of safety for them. It's not only about holding a secret, which is, which has no implications out there. It is information that has implications for their safety. It has implications for their finding opportunities or accessing people and networks out in the world. So it's important to maintain confidentiality. Please do not break confidentiality to show your support. So do not be the person who says, well, I have, I know 5 gay people and they are these, I have 10 lesbian friends and I have a trans man friend, I have a trans woman. To show your acceptance would be to also to support in a real way would be also to maintain confidentiality of this person. Do not share any information about them unless you have their consent to do so, because you could just break the news and leave, but the queer person will have to then bear the consequences of their identity being disclosed without consent. The next one, please. Okay, so this is some bit of homework. If people want to take a screenshot or a photograph of this slide, please feel free to do that. I'm just going to leave these questions as food for thought. If the first question, and for all of us to, as I said, I'm through this 1 hour, I'm hoping that we start thinking and that we start asking some of these questions, not of the world, but of our own selves. The first question here, if someone were to come out to you, what would your first thoughts be? How would you feel? The second question, how would you feel if a loved one came out to you? The third one, have you ever laughed at a joke that was at the expense of the LGBTQ community? And the fourth question, if you were not LGBTQ, but people thought you were, what would you feel? And these four questions, please treat it as some sort of homework or maybe some sort of journaling exercise. If all of you are, fans of journaling, reflect more than anything else. Think about how you are implicated in this system of gender and sexuality that privileges some people and then oppresses others based on arbitrary sort of formulations. So yeah, please do make note of the questions. I think screenshot is an easy way to do that. Can I move to the next slide? Has everyone made note? Okay, so this is next slide, please. After this. Okay, so this is a one-stop, as I said, resource bank. This one, the MHI QACP tab, is a one-stop resource bank. There are multiple videos, over 100 videos, that explain the connections between gender, sexuality, and mental health, that explain the mental health challenges faced by the LGBTQ community. And you can access these. They have been made by people in the community. They have been made by mental health practitioners who want to be affirmative in their work. So I think this would be a huge resource bank for all of you to access, for all those who want to know a little bit more, in addition to doing the homework that I just gave you all. And that brings us to the end of my presentation. There's just one more slide of resources, and I think that also can be shared if the folks at It's Okay to Talk want to sort of circulate some of this in your networks as well. These are all social media things to follow, and we can so this brings me to the end of my whatever I have to say, and thank you all for participating in the exercise on it and to make the most of it. So really thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I respond to questions if there are any. So I think we can stop the share. Yeah.
Thanks, Pooja. So if anyone has any questions for Pooja, they can just add it into the Q&A box or within the chat itself. If you would like to connect with Pooja after the session, you could reach out to either myself or to Arunima, and we'll make sure that your questions are routed towards Pooja as well. Thank you, Pooja. That was a really useful session.
I do hope so.
And lastly, there's a short poll that we fired again just to understand if the session was useful for you.
I could put my email ID in the chat box if anybody wants to then reach out. So I'll just do that. Thank you. I'm glad this was useful.
Thank you. So we've actually ended exactly on time. That's perfect. Our next session will start at 3 p.m. But thank you, Pooja, for taking all the time and taking us through this very interactive and useful session as well. I think personally I found a lot of new things to understand, and I really appreciate the video that the Mariwalas have made with Ayan's story as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shweta. I think I saw a question. Could I just respond to that quickly?
Yes, please go ahead.
The chat box, there was yeah, okay. So for budding queer psychologists, is there any advice? Um, well, at the so what's important is to recognize that your curriculum may not really equip you to respond to the needs of the community, of the LGBTQ community, which would require you to seek out, therefore, resources that can help you become more affirmative in your practice. So I think Madhvi, yeah, and one of the, as I said, one of the sort of resources would MH has been doing. It's one of the trainings. I'm sure there are others out there who would help you engage with this more. But it's important to recognize that some work might be needed from your part, because our college curriculum or higher education curriculum does not really equip us to, engage with gender, sexuality, and mental health.
Pooja, there's a couple of questions on the Q&A box as well.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So an anonymous attendee is asking, what does the double plus in LGBTQIA plus denote? They've recently seen it on a website.
Okay. So see, once you see that, what is seen as normal in society, what is seen as quote unquote natural and normal in society is a particular two kinds of gender, which are tied to two kinds of bodies, and then are supposed to have only one kind of sexuality, which is heterosexuality, are supposed to engage in only one kind of relationship, which is marriage. And then you see that outside of society's understandings, there are multiple lives and multiple identities. And there actually, there are as many identities as people are finding themselves, as people are experiencing. So we realize that LGBT could be a good starting point to understand, but there are people who are continuing to describe themselves in newer ways. And there are lots of gender. In fact, the last time someone was telling me that there were about 73 or 83 gender and sexual identities, which actually means that, outside of society's understandings, there are multiple identities, multiple lives, multiple desires, and therefore the plus denotes that the expansiveness of what lies outside of our understanding of two genders and one sexuality. Therefore, so which that plus is to denote that that open sort of multiplicity in identities, and that there are many more. These are only a few, is what plus means. Okay, I can see the next question from a person who has autism, ADHD. In addition to being queer and non-binary, are there resources and groups connected to people in these groups, as I feel lonely? There are groups online for those who are neurodivergent as well as queer. So if you could get in touch with me, I have put my email ID on the in the chat box, and you could also look up online for groups which are neurodivergent as well as queer. There are groups comprising of individuals who identify as such. So you could get in touch with me. You could also look online for groups, and there are. Thankfully now with internet and with social media, there are certain connections being made in this space. So I would be happy to direct you to some of these groups. Yeah.
Thank you, Pooja. In case there aren't any more questions, we'll move on to the next session now. Thanks, Pooja, for your time. As Pooja said, there's her email is available here. So if you have any questions, you could directly write to her for resources as well as for more detailed information about the QACP program that the Mariwalas run, as well as for other details on mental health support services for LGBTQIA groups.
So thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for also thinking of having this very important conversation as part of your Mann Mela. So I was really happy to see that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pooja. I will now hand over to my colleague Arunima. Our next session is on, again, inviting our artists who have shared their contributions to the Mann Mela art exhibition. And we would invite them to share more about their contribution and the art that they set. So over to you, Arunima.
Hi, everybody. So today's session is with another set of our artists who have contributed to the Mann Mela website and have contributed to the Hope Through Action Festival. We're very happy to invite Lakesha, Rumi, Abhirami, Tishan, and Meghana for today's session, where they will be sharing more information and their experience with the Hope Through Action Festival, what made them want to participate, their own experience with mental health, and so on. So may I please request all our panelists to please switch on their videos. Great. Hi, everybody. Okay. So today I'm going to begin by first showing the art exhibition over here. As you can see my screen on the Mann Mela website. We already spoke to 5 of the other artists in the morning, and now in the afternoon slot we're talking to 5 more. And I'm going to request everyone to come one by one to take us through their artwork and what really made them want to work on on their particular pieces, what kind of art form they've chosen, and how they feel about the connection between art and mental health itself. So may I please invite Lakesha first to uh, tell us more about yourself and to also just take us through your artwork as well. I'll just pull it up.
Hi, Mela.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
About myself, well, I'm a criminology and psychology major currently, and I'm a freelance fine artist. Art is something I do to just get away from things, I guess. I guess a lot of times it's just easier to create than it is to talk about things. So when I was told to create something that creates hope or talks about hope, this was the best thing for me. I think every time I paint, it's because I feel hopeful. Every time I feel dark and low and I don't know what to do, I cannot seem to create. And just being able to create is something that gives me a lot of hope because it makes me feel like, sure, my brain may not feel like it's doing right in a lot of ways, and I may not feel like I have control over it, but being able to create is something that I always have control over. And I may not feel the best about myself or the way that things are going, and it's so hard to express it verbally, even though so many of us struggle with depression and anxiety, so many things. And while things seem relatable, it's still hard to get out there and say how you feel. But when you create something, and if I just say, this brings me hope, I know there are a million interpretations in people's minds, and I love being able to hear that because it brings me hope in a million different ways. And that's what the piece is about. I wanted to portray how hard it can be when you feel like you need to step into this abyss of just talking about how you feel and expressing how you feel and just allowing yourself to feel things. I feel like a lot of times I numb myself so that I don't have to cope with my feelings, and being able to paint something that portrays that, like, hey, it's a bit hard to step into things like that, but it's okay. You have to do it. And you can take your time, you can do it slowly, because healing is not something that happens in an instant. It is something that's constantly happening with you. The way you heal will keep evolving, and the way you cope with problems will keep evolving. But you have to take that step. And I think that's what I thought of the moment I knew the brief. So that's what it's about.
Thanks, Lakesha, for sharing. Can you maybe also tell us more about, you titled your art piece Deluge. So, you want to give us more insights on how did you come about with the title, and what kind of connection do you feel exists between art and mental health itself, and how engaging with art makes you feel?
I think the title is something I struggled with. I didn't want it to seem dark, but also I'm very bad at naming things. I'm better with art than I am with words. But it does feel like a deluge. I think sometimes it feels like a storm. I knew it's something that's a water body. It always feels like it's something that's a current, keeps changing. And that's why it made the most sense to me. In relation to creation and art and mental health, as I said, I do struggle to talk about it. I'm open to talk about it, but sometimes you just feel so misunderstood. I think even when people get what you mean, sometimes you don't want to feel like people relate. Sometimes you want to feel like I feel all of this and I don't want relatability. I want someone to look at me and tell me that they get it without trying to tell me that they entirely relate, because your feelings feel so unique. So when I create, I feel like it's so unique in itself. Every feeling, I can get it out there. It's different colors and different things. The expression is such a big part of creation. And it's a way of speaking. You don't always have to talk verbally. You can ask for help in a lot of different ways. Verbally definitely helps, but there are different ways to get there. And I feel like creation is a great step to do that, because when I do that and people tell me, okay, this makes me feel things, or yeah, this is exactly how I've been feeling, I feel like, okay, I think I could talk to them about this. I think it brings a level of comfort. I think it's a sense of togetherness that art brings in so many different forms. And that's definitely the importance of it for me, because it feels hopeful in a lot of ways.
Thanks a lot, Lakesha, for sharing. Makes a lot of sense. And first, thank you so much for sharing this beautiful piece with us. And also just going in depth on how you see the connection between mental health and art. If you have any questions for Lakesha, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A box, and please be sure to visit the exhibition on manmela.in/festival, and where you can see artwork by all 15 of these wonderful artists who decided to share their work with us on Mela. Thanks a lot, Lakesha. Now, the next person I'd like to invite is Rumi. Would you like to come in and share about your artwork? And before that, Shraddha, do you think you can share screen? Yeah, thank you. Hi, Rumi. Could you please introduce yourself, and then we can go ahead and talk about your art piece, which is called Plaint Reflexation.
So, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, and this opportunity was amazing. And yeah, so hi, I'm MX Ria, and I've recently realized that I wanted to name myself Rumi, and express myself more authentically with a name which is spiritual, which is neutral, and it describes me better than my earlier name. So yeah, hi there, I'm Rumi, and I am a human rights youth activist, an educator, and an artist. So yeah, this was something that I really wanted to do. And this artwork is actually very personal to me, and it describes the story of how I dealt with my gender dysphoria, for the fact that for the longest time I felt disconnected, for the fact that it was hard for me to accept my body, which I couldn't truly connect with. And for the longest time, I didn't feel beautiful. and it was a dark time for me. But when I turned 20, I was hit with the spiritual realization that I had to follow a spiritual path, and this is true story. And after that, I realized that with spirituality, there also comes acceptance of yourself, of who you are, of your body, of your expression. And it was only then that I could then truly connect to my body and feel beautiful as a flower. And I also do the rituals that I do. And for me, spiritual rituals are not just, chanting or puja or meditation. It is also loving my body. So even in the artwork, there's me painting my beard, which is something that makes me feel really loved by myself and by my soul. And that's what I wanted to portray, that, times can be hard, and there can be times when you don't connect to yourself. And it's not just about LGBT. A lot of times, the kind of milieu that we have, we are not taught to love ourselves. We are constantly taught to compare ourselves to other people, to ourselves, or to the potential us that we can be. But that's when I realized that you don't have to do that. You have to just love yourself, try to connect with who you are. And this is how I dealt with it. This is not the story of all gender fluid individuals. This is how I could deal with it. I could stand in front of the mirror and feel connected eventually. And so, the play of words, how you can actually, use L and T or not use L and T, and it will still make sense. It can be pain, it can be plain, it can be plaint, it can be plain. And with reflection, I wanted to play with the words of reflection as in the mirror, and also a flex, which is, loving yourself. So this is simply what I wanted to portray, and this is the hope that I get. So yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And I think it's a very interesting title. And thanks so much for also getting into that as well, and sharing more about your work and about yourself. I think again, it's beautiful the way you used photographs and you put them together, and that really highlights what you're actually trying to convey through your artwork itself. So thank you so much for connecting with us, for sharing your art piece, and just overall being part of the festival. Again, everyone, you can just go onto the website. You can also follow me on Instagram. The link is on the page itself. And happy to hear any comments, questions so far from both the attendees and also from panelists. If you also have anything to add, or have a comment about Rumi's art piece or Lakesha's art piece, please feel free to unmute yourselves and talk about that. Or you can also use the chat box for our attendees. So in case no one has any comments at the moment, we can go ahead and listen to everyone first, and then we can come back for any last minute comments or questions that everyone has with each other. So next person I'd like to invite is Abhirami. Please, unmute yourself and tell us about yourself, about what you do, how you feel about mental health and art, and about your artwork as well. Shweta, can we move to Abhirami's art piece?
Hi everyone, my name is Abhirami. I'm originally from India, but I was born and raised in Dubai, UAE. I currently work in arts research in a library in a contemporary art museum here. But I did my bachelor's degree in India in National Institute of Design in exhibition design, where I gained interest in narratives, content creation, content systems, and systems design, where I used all of the education and the learnings to craft something called the White Lines Collective, which is a systems and social design inquiry into mental health narratives in higher education institutions worldwide and among young adults, so colleges and universities and individuals aged 18 to 6, to talk about your mental health through creative practices and creating various ways or avenues where they can come together, create visual works to discuss their mental health narratives and collectively cope. The piece that I've submitted is called "What These Hands Told Me," and it's sort of like a return to my creative practice in many ways as well. I've taken a break from my creative practice after I submitted my thesis. And this is the first thing that I've created in about 7 months. And it's a visual essay of photography and writing and collage that discusses the relationship between my hands and my mental health. I have come to realize over the past couple of years that whatever my body feels or my mind feels, it sort of manifests through my hands, whether it's a good thing or if it's a bad thing. And it's almost like I can tell how I feel, whether the good things or the bad things can always be personified, or I can build an understanding of the same through my hands itself. And it's a very new understanding that I've built over, say, like the past 6 months or so. And I assume it's because I have reached a point in my life where I feel a lot more stable, not just say professionally, but also personally, that I've had the time to sit and reflect on everything that's changed in, say, the past 5 or 6 years. Ever since I've turned 24, my life has taken a very different trajectory, and it's put me in a very reflective mindset as well. So this essay is the beginning at an attempt to trace these connections. It's my hands, I have noticed, have stood witness to almost everything that I have done in my life. They teach me to create. I use my hands primarily to read, to draw, anything that I use to nurture myself with, I use my hands. If it's a destructive act where I say harm myself, maybe harm others, whether anything that I do, it's personified again through my hands. So it's a very participatory, reflective activity that engages both my hands and my mind. And building this understanding, I think, is very crucial for me in how I continue to develop my psyche as well. And this understanding that my mind and my hand are so linked, and understanding the relationship, is crucial for me because I feel like my hands now, they hold so much more value to me because they are almost like a diary to all experiences I have garnered over 24 years of my life. And like they now account for, say, harmful things, they also account for the good creative things as well. So what I've begun doing is I've literally been dedicating my right arm to tattoos, I would like to say, that discuss my mental health. So the last slide in the visual essay itself is my first tattoo. I don't know if it's visible, but it looks like this, which is the tattoo is a depiction of songs that are important to me, songs that discuss my mental health, or songs that discuss mental health that I think are very resonant with how I describe my mental health as well. So it's almost like any sort of creative activity that I want to undertake, it's going to be personified through these arms itself. And I want my arms to continue to be this diary where I log everything that I sort of go through. And I realized that I have been treating my life as a series of transitionary phases. And if I can create some sense of stability, and if I can use my hands to create some sense of stability, then I think that's a great thing. And that's a way that I can keep track of myself, my mental health, whether it's good or if it's bad, depends on how the trajectory of my life changes. But I want to continue understanding this relationship for sure. And I'm grateful to the Mela for this opportunity to begin to share this narrative as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Abhirangi, for taking us through this. I mean, I think it's a very interesting. The entire photo essay itself is very interesting, and I know like reading through it on a share screen isn't as easy. So definitely go visit and check that out. I personally really liked how you like how your artwork explores the way your mental health and physical and how it manifests physically, how that basically plays out is really really interesting, and I think a very creatively put way of exploring that aspect of yourself. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Um, I'd like to invite Ehtishan, who is going to take us through his piece, Revival. And Ehtishan, can you begin by introducing yourself and more about your journey with the kind of art form you work on?
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Kishan. I'm an abstract artist from Kerala, and this painting I've titled it Revival. It is an abstract expression of an experience that I had. Maybe I think a lot of us have of blue days. Having blue days and following the same routines and the same feelings keeps on happening, and you can't really have anything to break away from it, and somehow out of the nothing, out of the blue, something happens, it can be an activity that you find interesting, or uh, or a book, or a person, or a song. It can be anything which triggers some kind of positivity inside you from those blue days, and which kind of revive your hope, and which breaks you away from those blue days. And that's what I've tried to portray through this abstract art. I kind of used a lot of blues signifying uh, the sad days, and all the negative feelings that keeps on happening like a spiral or a tunnel. And I've used yellow, which I personally relate to a feeling of hope or kind of joy. So that's it. And painting, it is always kind of meditative for me. I can kind of release all my negatives and things which I don't want in my head into this canvas and freeze it, and kind of make something beautiful out of it. And that's it.
Thanks, Ehtishan, for taking us through that. I did have a question around like how you've been working on abstract art for a while, and so what I wanted to ask you is how do you feel you're able to use the kind of art you're interested in, which is abstract art, into channeling your own emotions? And you could get into that a bit more. I know you did talk about how the colors play an impact uh, on how you're feeling and how you kind of take that through or take that through on your canvas as well. But a little more on what the process is like for you.
Yeah, coming to the process, I work abstract with colors which I relate to feelings. I always start with some emotion or a feeling that I want to get rid of, and kind of turn into something else. The process actually really meditative for me. I kind of play freely with the paints and watch the colors turn, which have a which kind of have a soothing effect on me. I can really watch this after the painting is created, like, the feeling that you get after a rain, or a something which is so releasing and freeing from all these thoughts on things happening. Playing with materials which I mostly use, like, hard textures and heavy textures. It's actually kind of meditative to like playing with it like a kid, you know, and watching the colors turn into different shades and this. I kind of watch this a lot while doing this, and it's really soothing.
Thank you for answering that. I think what I especially like about your artwork is how you particularly play with colors, and thank you so much for just like putting that through. And I think what's really interesting about how the kind of art you've submitted is that it doesn't really need any structure. It's very free flowing, and yet you are able to feel through and understand the mood of the piece itself. And I think that's really commendable. And thank you so much for sharing that with us and being a part of the festival. I think that's really great. Finally, next I'd like to invite Meghna, if you could come in and introduce yourself and tell us more about your zine, which is titled More Than My Trauma. Hey, Meghna.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm sorry if my background is disturbing. I was outside. Just
Okay.
tried to find a really quiet place to talk to you guys. Thank you everyone for all the attendees and the panelists and Arunima for organizing this and giving us this opportunity to share our art and also our stories through the art. I'm a public health professional. I work with an NGO here in Bangalore. I'm a self-taught artist, and I've been drawing, painting, trying out several mediums ever since my childhood. Basically, art was like an escape where I could express myself and just play with colors. And if I was bored, if I was any kind of emotion going through me, I would portray that through art. This piece is a design. I mean, it's a series of writings and pictures that I drew, talking about my experience with trauma and how I'm handling it, I guess, right? So the first picture, if you could go up. So the first picture is I titled my design is More Than My Trauma, because we are more than what happens to us, and we do get chances in life to to grow through these experiences to, to achieve our potential. And this is something I thought of, and I keep reminding myself to say that you're more than what happens to you. So just have to pull through, right? So and the picture is basically it's about a wave, which is representative of the kind of of like somebody else also described their emotions as a water body, and I really relate to that. And I mostly feel like these emotions are really overwhelming, like a wave, and on days I feel as if I am being crushed underneath these waves. So the rest of the series of pictures that I've drawn are mostly depicting all those emotions that I go through. And I have, sorry, so in this design, I talk about my experiences of trauma, and mostly to say that talking about our traumatic experiences, no matter if they're complex trauma like sexual abuse and physical abuse, or even something that is not considered as complex as these, like emotional neglect. So the first step in recovery is talking about what happened to you, and obviously wherever you feel safe, you can share these things with people. And this connects somehow to the theme of the whole exhibition, which says hope through action, right? I found hope only by talking to my friends. Thank you, Meera, for being here. I know she's in the audience. And so I've been very lucky, I would say, to have friends who openly talk about their mental health, to share their experiences, and who are very receptive of what I say, and who are very consciously supportive of my journey and my current self. So, so these pictures, I mean, if you could go through all of these later, I'm sure you would. So trauma exists in all of us, and it's basically just I wanted to show how it manifests in different parts of my body as well. How um, it has affected the way I think, how it has affected the way I behave, and uh, like who I am right now is also mostly, I would say, not mostly because of it, but some of my current behaviors are mostly determined by unresolved trauma, which I am trying to understand, to identify, and to sort them out, to find a way how to battle these behaviors that I've learned throughout my life, and to unlearn these behaviors and to start treating myself with more compassion, more kindness, and so that that I would forward those feelings to others as well. I don't want to talk too much, but I'm really thankful for this opportunity, and I really love everybody's artwork. I've just been going through these artworks yesterday, so yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Meghna, for sharing all of this, and especially I think a zine is like a really great combination of using words and using art to put your feelings forth. And I think that's a really wonderful way of just not only addressing the theme of the festival, which is hope through action, and that in that sense, it really explored how one is more than their trauma, and one is more than what has happened to them or anything else. I think that is that really good space of looking at hope, and thank you so much for sharing that. One of my questions to all of you is around, like, you've all shared very personal pieces of art that explore yourselves, and also very different kinds of artwork. So we have like not like a more traditional sense of art, which is on a canvas that Nikesha has done. We have digital art, we have photography involved with it, and a photo essay. So I think a lot of different kinds of art modalities that we've explored through all of you. So I think my question to you all is how, like, when you began with your art, when you started exploring art, and especially with relation to using art and exploring art to further explore mental health, what kind of art fits best for you, and how was that discovery which led you to the kind of art that that you most relate to yourself, or like that helps you in that that helps you have that cathartic relief, or like that sense of, okay, now I feel great after uh, doing art. So anyone can answer.
Okay, I'll go ahead. So the only reason that I went forward with, photography and eventually putting it into a kind of, trippy kind of poster was for the reason that I feel like photography is a very beautiful art form, for the fact also that I love to be in front of the camera. And I've done theater, and for the fact that I feel like expressions and gestures and body can actually communicate a lot, which I personally cannot communicate through my words. So I think I found that kind of, that kind of expression in photography and modeling. And that's why I just put it into the poster that you saw today. Yeah. Akisha, you can go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to know who's speaking when. I think in relation to art, I think I treat art the same way that I treat my mental health, as when I don't stop exploring. Every day I wake up and there's something new that I need to deal with. But with art, it's definitely something I don't like to cage myself with. It's something I keep exploring, because when it comes to forms of self-expression, I think things in the world are already so caging when it comes to so many things, that when it comes to art, I do not want to restrict myself. A lot of times I'm already struggling with self-loathing and self-esteem, and I don't like what I create. I know I'm meant to sound hopeful when it comes to art, and I am, but sometimes you don't like what you're doing, and you just have to keep trying things and keep failing and keep hating your work and coming to terms with liking it. So for me, what I find most comfortable in any moment is what feels right in that moment. I think trying new stuff can be very freeing. It can be quite healing. I think just letting go, because it comes in this form, I think as someone who struggles with depression, self-harm is also something I struggle with. I think one of you talked about your hands and, what you create and also what you do with them. And it's not always the best things. I think sometimes focusing your mind on finding new things and doing new things can definitely be freeing. So art as a form, as a fine artist, I try not to restrict myself and keep finding new things that I resonate with, because just like your mental health, coping methods will keep changing and the way you deal with things will keep evolving and changing. So definitely not something I can narrow down, but also something I don't try to restrict when it comes to it. So that would be.
That's really great, actually. I think that's really good advice to anyone who is, in a way, exploring different kind of modalities, different kind of art forms. So thanks a lot to me, Lakesh, for sharing that. Abhirami, Etishan, Megha, do you guys have anything you'd like to add, or your own comments?
I've I've always been a bit obsessed with the idea of documenting, or the idea of an archive, and the idea of building narratives out of things. I feel like that's one way we sort of like immortalize things. And just like I mentioned before, like we live our lives so quickly that we don't stop to like truly understand that we're in whatever state that we're living in right now. I am actually a trained fine artist, but the reason that I didn't do fine arts is similar to what Lakeisha said. Sometimes you just don't like the work that you create. And it's been a long, long time since I've gone back to painting and drawing and doing all those things. And for me, what's most therapeutic in terms of the work I create is photography and writing and collage, and merging all of those together in some sort of amalgamation. Because to me, I like the idea of that being a mess, because it's through the mess that I can somehow make sense of that mess. So sometimes I get stuck in the rut that maybe the mess also needs to be a bit pretty. And I need to constantly consciously tell myself that mess doesn't need to always be pretty as well, that it's something that I need to unlearn as well. So amalgamating collage and writing and photography, which is what I do the most often, is a way for me not only like professionally to develop my practice, but also personally for me to let go of all of these inhibitions I have in expressing myself. So I think that's the route, or that's the reason I chose this route. Or I mean, that's also the reason I continue down this route of merging these three together. It's also a lot of fear of creating, again, like I said before. It's not that I lack the talent or anything, but it's just the fear of how would it be received, especially in today's age where social media just blows anything up and you're just like, oh, I'm so talentless, or nothing I create is going to be received well, no one's going to like it. It's not going to get likes or reshares or retweets or whatever. And you're constantly left wondering, like, what's the point of me having all this talent and things like that. So all of this self-doubt, for me, it's very important that I note down these self-doubts in whatever form I can as quickly as I can. So for me, writing and photography is the quickest way to do that.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing that. I think all of you did answer my question pretty well. I think one last question before we take any audience questions is, if you had to describe to one word to describe how you felt after finishing the art piece that you submitted, how would you like to describe that?
I guess I'll go. One word. This is so bad, but I'm gonna say relief. I think just as an artist, I'm always pushing myself to be good, to be great. It can be very taxing on my mental health, but it is also something that's probably the best for my mental health once it's done. So relief is the word. I'm going with that one.
All right. What about everyone else?
Yeah, I would. Sorry. So I would agree with Lakeisha too. I was just thinking, just the word relief is going around in my head, and she spoke it. I did go through a panic attack or two, trying to, just like this is. I mean, I was judging myself too much while while making the art piece, and also a lot of a lot of memories, old memories triggered and whatnot. So it was a difficult process, but once it was done, and I looked at the end result, no matter how I felt about it, I was really relieved, and and also that I could share it with everybody else. Earlier, most of the art that I did was mostly like for myself, and I would post on social network, but most of the personal pieces I would just keep to myself. So I guess this is one step ahead. So
Thanks, Megha. Yeah, do memes.
I mean, I would agree with both of them that relief was something that I too felt, but with that, I also felt liberated because at the end of the day, I could also put whatever was in my mind onto that art, and it came out decently. And I feel like, again, the word is decent. You never get satisfied with the work that you do. But I think, yes, there was a sense of liberation where I felt like, yes, this could perhaps make a difference. It made a difference in my life. The entire routine of, painting my beard helped me, which I tried to portray it in the artwork. And I feel like I felt that kind of liberation. And the hope for me is that it reaches out to other, perhaps gender fluid individuals who also feel the same as I do and feel liberated by just realizing that they're not alone and they feel heard. Yeah.
Thank you. Hatishan, would you like to go next? You're on mute if you're speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I have one word, I would say ecstasy, being in ecstasy. After finishing this painting, whatever the feel it may be, or whatever, after finishing it, it feels so high, like, you know, cleared out and released. Maybe ecstasy being
think we lost you a bit on the last sentence. Could you please repeat that again?
Hello?
You're on mute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a big trouble. I would say it's being in ecstasy after finishing any kind of work, whatever the theme may be. I'll be so relieved and I'll be full of love for everything, feeling so trusting. So I need ecstasy.
I think we were still unable to hear you clearly, Atishan, but I think feel free to type it in the chat box as well so that we can all get a chance to clearly also understand what
Yeah,
you were saying at the end. And you can type it on in the chat box as well. Abhirami, what about you? Have you been able to think about the word that you can describe?
I would say beginning, because it's a strange word to associate, but I would say beginning because this is the first piece of work that I've created for myself in a very long time. This is the first work that I've created that has a sense of permanence rooted. This is the first work that I've created that's not for like grades for college, any other sort of academic value or things like that. This is the first work I've created in a very long time as well. So it's a beginning on many different fronts. It's the first work I've created to understand myself better with all the, say, creative professional knowledge I've accumulated in a very long time as well. So I would say beginning. Yes.
I think that's a great word to associate your art with as well. I think that's great. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your thoughts and your process with your artwork as well. I'd like to ask attendees, if, in case you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. We do have some time. If in case you have any other questions or any other comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. I think panelists, if you would also have anything else you'd like to say or add, any comment towards the end as we close, please feel free to unmute yourselves and say. Oh, Artishan is saying that if it's one word, I would say ecstasy, because after finishing every picture, that's the only constant feeling I get. Very nicely put, Artishan. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I'm just checking the Q&A box. We had one question, but I think Nikesh has already answered that, which is, how would you describe your experience of being a fine artist in today's world, where more and more things are becoming digital? Lakesh has said that it's hard and there's a good amount of anxiety. I think, would you like to expand on that a little bit, or does anyone else also want to add to Lakesha's answer? Or Lakesha, would you like to add more to that?
Sure. I mean, I don't think I answered that very well on chat. Yeah, I think as someone who's not a digital artist, and also as somebody who I don't think I'd ever get into it. I think it's like not something that's meant for me. I think it is definitely hard as a fine artist because erasing your mistakes is harder, I think. And I think pieces take longer. I think when you just don't know when to stop. I'm sure that counts for digital art as well. There are a lot of things in common, but digital art is just such a platform right now where it's quicker, it's more efficient, it's something that doesn't cost you that much money to create. I think as an artist, we spend so much money as a fine artist, which is one of the hardest things And then if you're not satisfied, you're just going down this spiral. But it's definitely harder getting out as many pieces as well. And social media definitely makes it harder, because then you're not just an artist, you're also a photographer, an editor. You are so many things, trying to capture your work and get it out there, and trying to appeal to the world with fine artistry, which is not something that a lot of people are doing anymore. So definitely harder, but also definitely worth it if it is something that you love to do.
Thanks for expanding on that. I think I do definitely agree with you. Like, when once you're on social media, once you're in the digital space, there's just one person having to wear too many hats. And I think that really makes sense. And thanks so much for sharing that. Do we have any other questions from anybody? Any comments? Um, in this case, if we don't, then I think we can close the session for today. And as we close, I'll just say thank you, everybody, for sharing your artwork, for engaging in this whole process, this past month, and just constantly being there, being available, sending everything, working really hard, and sharing your art and something which is a part of yourselves with us on Mela. And I'm really thankful to all of you, and really, really happy that you could be a part of the festival. Thank you so much. Our next session is starting in another 5 minutes. It's on creating a suicide safety plan for either oneself or for someone they know. This is being taken by Sachi Mulki, who is a training manager at Sisters Living Works. I'd like to hand over the session back to Shweta and introduce Sachi. Hey.
Hi, thanks, Arunima, and thank you everyone for taking us through your art as well. I'm just going to move all of you into the attendee panel and move to the session with Sachi. Thank you so much. Hi, Sachi, how are you?
Hi, Shweta, I'm fine. How are you?
All, yeah, good. Doing okay. All right. Thanks, Sachi. So before I hand over to you, I think we're about 5 minutes early as well. So if you want, we can just take a break for 5 minutes, give participants a chance to just go grab some water and come back as well. And then we'll begin at 4.
Sure, sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi everyone. I hope everyone's back and we can begin now. So you'll see a poll on your screen. This is just a pre-poll for this particular session to understand your awareness of the topic that will be covered, and we will have a post as for every session at the end of this as well. Before we begin, I would like to introduce Sachi. Sachi, are you around? Yes, great. Cool. And Sachi, just checking, you would be sharing your own screen, right?
I will be, yeah.
Great. Okay. So thanks everyone for joining. And I understand it's actually been quite a number of sessions back to back. So it's absolutely fine if anyone needs a break. I think we do have a break scheduled right after this one before we go into the last few sessions for the day. So just as a brief introduction, Sachi is a psychologist by training. She has completed her MSc in clinical psychology from the Manipal Academy of Higher Education. Interestingly, the Sangath also has a partnership with MAHE for providing PhD studentships with Sangath at the university. Sachi works with Sister Living Works as a training manager, where she facilitates suicide prevention workshops that aim to raise awareness and equip participants to serve as a first responder to someone in a suicide crisis. Sachi also facilitates the support groups conducted by Sisters Living Works, which are meant for mental health, but mainly for survivors of suicide loss. I'll stop sharing now, Sachi. Over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in. I am Sachi Mulki. I work with an organization called Sisters Living Works, and Sisters Living Works is a not-for-profit organization that is dedicated to the cause of suicide prevention. Sisters Living Works was founded in the year 2015 by Mrs. Gayatri Datta after she lost her family members to suicide. With the pain and grief that she experienced, she pledged to work towards the cause of suicide prevention and create awareness, and that's where Sisters Living Works journey began. So as an organization, our mission is prevention of suicide in India by raising community awareness, community involvement, education, and advocacy for change. So over the years, we have worked towards spreading awareness to individuals in schools, colleges, and organizations. We conduct workshops on suicide prevention awareness. And the idea is to equip individuals with skills to respond to someone in a suicide crisis. We've also reached out to individuals who've lost a loved one to suicide. So we conduct monthly support groups for emotional distress, but also support groups specifically for survivors of suicide loss. We have been working towards providing support and assistance to individuals who have been affected by suicide through our website, social media, brochures, and other events. We've also been actively involved in informing the media and the community about how best to report and discuss suicides. So as we understand that suicide is a global phenomenon, it takes place when there is a breakdown in a person's ability to cope with the crisis situation. Suicide is something which can affect everyone, but some individuals might be more vulnerable to suicide than others. When it comes to young people, suicide is the fourth leading cause of death, 15 to 19-year-olds. There are a lot of myths and misconceptions that people hold about suicide, and this is one of the major reasons why suicide continues to remain stigmatized in our society. One of the major misconceptions that people have is about the prevention of suicide. People feel that not much can be done to prevent a suicide. It is sudden, very little can be done. But in fact, suicide is one of the most preventable forms of death. It's very important for all of us to educate ourselves on this. understand that there are warning signs for suicide, understand how a person can be supported, how best they can take care of themselves and reach out for help in time of a crisis situation. So when it comes to talking about suicide prevention, I will be addressing one such aspect, which is a suicide safety plan. So maybe if anyone has an idea about what a suicide safety plan is, you can maybe type it down in the chat box. What do you think it possibly could be? Okay, recognize personal vulnerability. Okay. Plan to help someone reduce the risk. Be aware of the stigmas that instigate suicidal thoughts. Okay. Okay, fair enough. So we'll be looking at what exactly is a suicide safety plan and why is it important and how efficient it possibly could be. So a suicide safety plan is a tool which guides someone who is experiencing suicidal thoughts and feelings to help them avoid a state of intense suicidal crisis. So this is an evidence-based intervention. So when you talk about, on one hand, you have suicidal thoughts and feelings. Now, when these thoughts and feelings set in, within a span of, say, a few minutes or few hours, these thoughts can actually intensify and reach a point when a person experiences intense suicidal crisis. Now, this is a state when a person might make an attempt, a person might want to act upon these urges or thoughts or feelings that they're going through. So that is where a suicide plan comes into the picture. This helps one avoid the state of, intense suicidal crisis. So a safety plan is something which focuses on an individual's strengths. It helps you identify your unique abilities and strengths that you can tap into to cope with a crisis situation. So it starts from within and eventually branches out to external resources that you can tap into in times of a crisis. It is organized in stages. So there are 6 different stages. And generally, you start with the first stage. If that is, start with the first stage, then you move on in one, you see if it's working out for you, if it's helping you feel better, if it helps you to resolve the crisis, then you stop there, or else you move on to the next stage. So before we look at what really goes into a suicide safety plan, let's look at why is this important. So a lot of times people feel that suicidal thoughts are permanent, but the point is they're temporary. They can come and they can go, and suicide risk fluctuates over time. So it can start with warning signs and certain triggers, and over a period of time it can intensify and reach a point, that is reach a peak, where there is a danger of acting on these thoughts and feelings. So when you talk about people who might be experiencing suicidal thoughts, there are 2 key features that we often look into. First is ambivalent, and second is rigidity. So ambivalence, as the name suggests, means that people who are experiencing suicidal thoughts, often they experience the sense of an emotional conflict. So on one end, there is this, urge to escape the pain and despair that they're dealing with, basically an urge to end their suffering. And on the other hand, there is an urge to, live. And this wish can go side by side for a very long time. It can go on till the very point they decide to make an attempt. So there is the sense of ambivalence which exists. So when the urge to end one's suffering, the urge to end this pain increases, we need to bring in some kind of an intervention which will increase their urge or their wish to live. On the second hand, we have rigidity. So rigidity means that when people are experiencing intense emotional distress, it can be very hard for them to think about alternative solutions to their problems. Their thoughts, their feelings, their behaviors, all of these are directed in the direction of suicide. It's very hard for them to see that there could be a possible solution, there could be an alternative to how they're feeling. It almost appears like this is it. This is how it is going to be. I don't think things are going to get better. So a person is asked to think of possible solutions at that point in time. So that is where the importance of a suicide safety plan comes into the picture. When a person is in a state of intense emotional distress, it can be very difficult, one, to identify a crisis is starting to occur. Second, it can be very hard to come up with coping skills or problem solving strategies at that point in time. These skills tend to decrease in times of emotional crisis. Suicide safety plan also acts as a mental health first aid kit. You have a list of resources, a list of steps that you have to tap into. And it helps one feel more in control. So at that point in time, when a person is experiencing these thoughts, there is a feeling of everything going out of control. A person can feel really overwhelmed, not knowing what to do. So a suicide safety plan establishes a framework, establishes a sense of stability and control in a situation like that. Now, who is this for? Now, this would be for someone who is at a risk for suicide, but not immediate rescue, where the risk is very high. Individuals who may have had a recent history of suicidal ideation, a history of suicide attempt, history of an interrupted or an aborted attempt, history of making any plan or preparation for suicide in the past. You can create a safety plan. So it is highly suggested that you create a safety plan with your clinician, a mental health professional, or a healthcare provider. However, you can also create a safety plan with the help of a trusted individual. So remember, this is a collaborative process. So in case you're unable to do this with a clinician or with your healthcare provider, you might take the assistance of a person you trust. But this is a collaborative process and not something that you should be doing alone. So now I will be looking at the 6 components of a safety plan, which was given by Stanley and Brown. So the very first step or the very first aspect of a safety plan is identifying warning signs. Now, this will also help you understand when is it that you need to activate your safety plan. Now, when people start experiencing, thoughts of suicide, there are a lot of situations that precede it. Certain thoughts, certain moods, certain behaviors, which indicate that the crisis is starting to set in. Now, these signs could vary from person to person. Everyone could have something very specific to them. So when you are sitting and creating this plan, you might want to ask these questions. Number one is, what do you experience when you start thinking about suicide? What are some thoughts that go on in your mind? How do you feel? Do you engage in certain behaviors which indicate that your thoughts or the fact that you are moving towards a state of intense emotional distress? You might also want to reflect back upon a previous situation when when a crisis occurred. What did you experience at that time? For some individuals, this could mean that there are specific situations that trigger certain thoughts. Say, for example, you argue with a family member. That leads to thoughts like, this is not good, I'm not happy. Eventually, it might go on to, I can't take this anymore. They are better off without me. Burden on everyone. You might start feeling overwhelmed. At that point in time, your behavior may be inclined towards maybe drinking as a means to cope with the situation. So it's important for you to identify what are these warning signs that indicate that you might be nearing a crisis situation. So why is it important for us to identify these signs? One, because it allows you a window to cope with it before these thoughts and feelings intensify to a point where you feel like acting upon it. Secondly, when you identify these signs, it can also help when you share it with your trusted contacts or people around you. They might also be aware that these are possible signs which might be triggers for you. So even if you are not able to identify it, they might be able to help you identify that you may not be feeling that well at this point in time. So once you know what your warning signs are, the second step is internal coping strategies. So over here, the idea behind these coping strategies is to help you distract yourself, take your mind off these distressing thoughts and feelings. So when you are trying to identify these coping strategies, you need to ask yourself, what can you do to help yourself from not acting on your thoughts or urges? What have you done in the past to take your mind off suicidal thoughts without contacting another person? So it's important to remember in the second step, we are still not involving another person. What we're doing here, we're trying to find out what are some strategies that work well for me, what might help me feel better, even if it's for some time, something that might help me take my mind off these thoughts and feelings. Now, the best coping strategies would be something that is simple, that is easy to carry out, most importantly, something that works best for you. So even if you are helping someone prepare a safety plan, it's important that you help them navigate and explore and what works best for them. Now, remember, we are tapping into our own resources at this time. We are not reaching out to anyone, but we are identifying our own or things that work well for us. Now, examples of coping strategies could be a distracting activity, say watching a funny movie, listening to music, a relaxation technique, maybe breathing or playing with your pet, a physical activity like dancing or singing or anything that makes you feel good, that takes your mind off these thoughts. Now, it's important for you to assess the feasibility of these strategies. So you also make a plan of how do you think you will be able to carry out this action or this strategy in a time of distress? What might stand in the way of you thinking of these activities or doing them if you think of it? List out alternative strategies. So say, for example, I've realized that the best coping strategy for me is when I go out for a run. But if these thoughts start setting in at the morning, it may not be the most feasible strategy to implement. So I might want to come up with another strategy that I can implement at that point in time. So it's important to have a list of different strategies that work well for you. The third step is social contacts who might distract from crisis. So again, we are looking at factors that can help us distract ourselves from these thoughts and feelings. So over here, you are going to look at social settings, or you're going to look at social contacts that you can engage with that will allow you to take your mind off the problems, even for some time. So you might want to ask questions like who or what social setting helps you take your mind off problems, even if it's for some time. Who helps you feel better when you socialize with them? So you might want to list out safe places that you can go to where you are around people. Now, for a lot of people, a change in environment works very well. It acts as a good distraction. So if you're at home, you might want to go out to the park outside, which helps you feel better. You may not necessarily talk to people around, but you're in a different place where there are people around. Sometimes for some people, it might help to socialize with another person, maybe meet a friend, get a coffee. That might help you feel better. So list out what these possible situations and people can be in your. So say, for example, I feel that maybe going to a park where there are people around me makes me feel better, might help me take my mind off the situation. So I might list going to the park as a strategy over here. But now I have to understand what are the potential challenges and feasibility of this strategy. How am I going to go to this park? Do I have to cross the road? Will I be in the frame of mind to cross the road properly? Will I need someone to help me go there? Is it very far away from where I stay? How am I going to get there? So these are things that you need to keep in mind as to what works for you and how feasible this might be. So if you go back to understanding the steps, so first we identified the warning signs. So once you know what your warning signs are, you know this is time to activate your safety plan. Right after that, you engage in the internal coping strategies that you have listed out. If that makes you feel better, that is good. In case it's not helping you feel better, which is relaxed or in a better frame of mind, go on to the next step, which is listing out places that you can go to, people you can socialize with, a change in environment. Now, in case this is also not helping you out, you still feel that you are still very distressed, and this is not helping, next step would be listing out family members or friends who may be able to offer help. So in this component, you basically list out contacts or family members, friends you can contact for support and help during a crisis. So when you are listing out this, you might want to ask yourself questions like, among your family or friends, who do you think contact for help during a crisis? Who is supportive of you, and who do you feel that you can talk with when you are under stress? Who is that one person you'd like to reach out to? How are you going to be able to reach out to this person? Now you have to list down several contacts. It's important you have more than one, because in case one contact is not reachable, you call up the second person. You might want to prioritize the list, starting with the person you might want to reach out to first. If that doesn't work out, you call the second person. Now, in this step, unlike the previous step, you will let your contact know that you are in a crisis. So in the third step, where we talk about going, socializing with other people or going into another social setting, you may not necessarily tell a person that you are in a crisis. You are probably still in a space where you just want to socialize and distract yourself. But in this step, when you're reaching out to a family member, you do let them know you are in a crisis, that you need their support or help, which could either mean that you need them to be around or you need their assistance in going to a certain place, that is going to the hospital or the healthcare center. You need to inform the contact listed that they are a part of your suicide safety plan. So it's important that you let them know that I am your number to this list of mine, to my safety plan, and that I might contact you in time of a crisis. So it's important that they are aware as well. Now, in case you realize that even speaking to a family member, or you feel that, where you're feeling nothing, the crisis isn't getting resolved, your feelings, your thoughts are only intensifying, everything feels really overwhelming, you might want to reach out to professionals. So you might now have to list out professionals or agencies that you can possibly contact in times of a crisis. So you might want to ask yourself questions, the mental health professionals that we should identify to be on the safety plan. So for example, are there any other healthcare providers that I would like to list out on my plan? So you might, in this aspect of your plan, you will also list out crisis helpline numbers. In case you're helping a loved one prepare the safety plan, you might want to call up these helpline numbers beforehand and let them know that this might contact you through this number, so that they are aware as well. You will want to list out names, numbers, and locations of professionals that you can reach out to, and also let them know that they are a part of your safety plan. You might want to write down the name, number, and location of nearby hospitals. You might also want to list out the number of your local police station in case you need help reaching to the hospital. So you have to assess the feasibility of the points in this segment as well. So for example, if I know I need to go to the hospital, how am I going there? It may not be safe for me to drive on my own, but I might need someone to take me there. How will that happen? Do I need to call up a person who might take me? Can I inform someone to arrange for transport? Or, so these things have to be also taken care of as to how is this going to be implemented eventually. Now, the last aspect of a suicide safety plan is making the environment safe. Now, it's very important to remember that, sometimes people have very easy access to lethal means around them, and easy accessibility can increase the risk for suicide. So we have to make their environment secure. So you might want to ask yourself if there are any objects around you that you might possibly use to hurt yourself. If you have thought of something beforehand, you might want to put it down. If I have thought of a certain object, or I have thought of certain means or methods that have come to my mind before. So you might want to list these things down so as to make the environment more secure. So once you have listed out what these potential items or objects are, then you have to find ways to secure or limit access to lethal means. So for example, I have certain medications in my room, which I feel might, consume, or I've had thoughts of taking them in the past. So I might want to remove all these medications and maybe give it to another trusted family member, or I might want to not keep it around me. So this is again something that you will take care of after the safety plan has been developed. So it's very important to remember that even if you are helping a loved one prepare a safety plan, it's important that they are the ones, who have ownership of the plan. So in the sense that you should not be imposing your ideas or strategies that you feel work best for them. So if you are supporting someone or helping someone, remember that you have to allow them to, find out what strategies work well for them, explore what might work for them based on questions that you can ask. You can help them develop it. The plan should be in the words of the person who is using it. You should not create a safety plan when you are experiencing emotional distress. So this is best developed when you are in a more relaxed state of mind. You have to ensure that all your trusted contacts have a copy of the plan. So if I know that I have put person A's number as a part of my trusted contact list, I need to let them know that they are on the list and also give them a copy of the plan. You might want to keep a copy with family members as well. Revisit and revise your plan. So a suicide safety plan is not written in stone. It requires revision based on what works well for you. So maybe after a month or two, you realize that a particular strategy is not working out for you, or you find out that this is a particular strategy that really helps me. I realize that dancing is something that helps me take my mind off these thoughts. So I might want to add dancing to that list. Sometimes you might not be in touch with a person who is listed on your contact list. So you might want to update and make changes accordingly. So this is something which requires constant revision based on what is working well for you, what is not working for you. You can skip steps depending on the situation. So although a safety plan has all the steps written, you are allowed to skip it. For example, you suddenly feel that there's an intense emotional distress that you're experiencing, and there is a very strong urge to hurt yourself or act on these urges. So at that point in time, it may not be feasible to engage in a coping strategy, but you might want to get help immediately, whether that is reaching out to your trusted contact and letting them know that you need to get to the hospital, or reaching out to the emergency center. So you are allowed to skip steps depending on what the situation looks like. Keep your plan where you easily access it. So a lot of times you might want to keep a copy of this on your phone, since everyone carries their phone around. If not, you might want to say put it up in your room if that is something that is feasible for you. You might want to put it up where you can see it, where it's easily accessible to you. So these are some points that one can take note of when it comes to developing a suicide safety plan. Now, studies have shown that this actually helps reduce risk. A lot of times, people who have worked with these safety plans, they have found a sense of structure, especially in times of intense crisis when you can't think straight, you can't come up with solutions. You already have something that tells you what exactly to do next. So that brings me to the end of my session. I will be sharing a copy of what a safety plan looks like, a template that you can actually utilize. One second. So this is a template which is by Brown and Stanley, which basically contains all the components that I explained. The patient safety plan, which has the warning signs. Again, remember, this is unique to each person, so you know best as to what are the signs that you experience. Second, your internal coping strategies, things which help you take your mind off the problems without contacting another person. Again, remember that this would be something which is most feasible for you. It's easy to carry out, and something that works well for you. Step number 3 is people, social settings that can provide you a distraction. People whom I can ask for help, which is your trusted contacts, professionals or agencies that you can contact in times of crisis, and making the environment safe. So how can you possibly secure your environment? Now, step number 6 is something which you can implement immediately after you have created a safety plan. And in the end, there is a line which is the one thing that is most important to me and worth living for is, so a reminder. So I will be sharing a copy of this template as well, and it's available online. Yeah.
Thanks, Sachi. Okay, so just wanted to check with attendees if there are any questions for Sachi at this point related to creating a suicide safety plan, or if there's more information that you would like about the work that Sachi does with Sisters Doing Works. You could either ask her directly, or we would, or just add that into the Q&A. Yeah, Sachi will have some questions coming in, so you can just answer these live as well.
Right. Yeah, so I have a question, which is, could you please share the PPT and the name of the model? So I can definitely share the template, which I think is available, and that's what this was based on. So this was given by Brown and Stanley, and it is an evidence-based intervention, and you have a template which is available online. The second question is, what can we do as neighbors? So if you, for example, if your neighbor has confided in you, or if your neighbor is someone who who you are helping with the suicide safety plan, of course, you could be on their list of a trusted contact. And maybe in case they need assistance in going somewhere, or say getting to the hospital, or for that matter, talking, you might want to let them know that they can put your number there as well. So that is something that you can do as neighbors. Of course, it's highly suggested that this is something which is done in collaboration with a clinician or a health provider. But of course, in times when we are not able to access, or for some reason you're unable to access these resources, you can still create one with trusted person. So it's always in collaboration, remember, not something that you should be doing alone, because that also helps you to understand the feasibility and assess the quality of the plan. So
Sachita, Divya
yeah.
has raised her hand. I'm just checking. Divya, I've allowed you to talk. If you could just unmute yourself, you would be able to ask your question directly to Shachi.
Ma'am, ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
I
we
can,
can.
Divya.
Ma'am, we have two suicides in our locality, and it's not even spoken about to an extent that even I came to know about it off late. Like the suicide happens, and I come to know about it like some 6 months later from somebody who just blurted out that there's been a suicide. Because even within the family, they'll be like, "Oh my God, we shouldn't tell anybody that this has happened to a friend or a neighbor." And when I mean neighbor, it's not like near my house. We are in a housing colony. So there
Mhm.
might be at least like more than 100 people, of much more than that. And it can be people who are like at the other end of the colony, and we don't like, at least I don't go out so often, so I don't really meet anybody. But yes, it was a cause of concern. There were already two suicides within a colony that was like pretty close, and like it's the same housing colony, and that's also alarming because people who are like pretty much near you, at least their house is near yours, and there's also already been two suicides in just, I think, around 2 years or 1 year.
Right. So I think when we're talking about in terms of awareness, I feel if it's a colony, I think it might really help one to maybe have a session or sessions that really educate people on in case a person's feeling this way, what are some ways in which they can access help, because again a lot of people are very hesitant um, reach out for help, but a lot of times people don't even know where to go or whom do we ask for help. A lot of times because of the way we look at suicide, people feel like it's a very personal individual matter, an instance of a personal failure, which is not the case. And as a result of which, people are really hesitant to even ask for help when they are struggling. So maybe having sessions that initiate conversations around suicide prevention might help. Conversations that encourage people to get help, whether that's calling up a helpline, seeing a mental health professional, reaching out when they are feeling this way. But also, the second thing that I would maybe like to talk about is, since you mentioned that there are two families in the colony who have experienced, the loss of a loved one. And, even then again, it's important that as a colony, you continue to support these families as well, because at our organization we do work very closely with survivors of loss, and we really focus on their mental well-being in situations like this, because studies have shown that even survivors of loss, or people who have lost loved ones to suicide, are also at a risk for suicidal ideation. And a lot has to do with the way in which because we don't talk about suicide, because suicide is such a hush hush topic in general, they don't have enough opportunities to talk about their grief. A lot of them may not feel be okay to open up or talk freely about their loss, and that can make it very difficult for them. So maybe if you're talking about as neighbors, what you could possibly do is to, of course, continue to support them in a way that let them know that you're around. Be aware of the fact that this can also be very difficult for the family as well, but maybe having sessions that can initiate more conversations around the topic might really help in building more awareness in the colony, among people, sharing resources that they can access as well. So that is something that I'd like to add.
Thank you, ma'am. That was really helpful.
Sachi, just I think you answered both questions together. There's another anonymous attendee who's asked,
Yeah.
how should we talk to someone whom we suspect might be struggling with suicidal thoughts?
Right. How should we talk to someone? So, of course, this again is a very important point, because a lot of times people are hesitant to talk or ask someone who might be struggling with suicidal thoughts, because there is a notion that maybe asking or even mentioning it might, plant an idea in their head, might urge them to act on this thought. But studies have shown that talking about suicide does not increase the risk, neither does it create the risk. So, when we are talking about supporting someone who might be struggling, the most important step is to ask them openly. So, if you feel that this person I know is, maybe struggling or maybe thinking about suicide, it might help to ask them that, I've been concerned about you lately. Is there something you would like to talk about? Have you been thinking about suicide? Is this something that has been going on in your mind? So it's important to directly ask them if you suspect that they might be considering suicide. Now, why is it important to ask? Because talking about it, asking basically creates a window for a two-way communication. And for all you know, this person might just actually want to talk to someone about what they're going through. So there is no harm in asking someone if you feel they might be struggling. And that's probably the first and most important step when it comes to, supporting someone who is in a crisis state.
And sorry, finally, there are two more questions.
Yeah.
So can you please comment on how we can help the family members of persons with suicidality?
Right. How can we, how can we help? Right. So when we're talking about family members of people who might be experiencing suicidal thoughts, I think it's very important that the family continues to, support the. They're not dismissive about what is going on. Of course, if there is one family member struggling who might be experiencing suicidal thoughts, this could also have an impact in the sense that, people around might be stressed, you might be concerned about your loved one. That also might be affecting you emotionally because you're seeing struggle. So it's important that they also take care of their mental well-being at that point in time. But of course, if you know there is someone in the house who might be thinking about suicide, it's important to continue to offer your support, to not be dismissive, because that's a very common thing that happens. When a person talks about the fact that they're thinking about suicide, people invalidate it, people dismiss them and say things like, this is attention seeking, or this is just you being dramatic, or you not being strong enough. And that is not something that a person would like to hear. So continue to offer your support, let them know that you're there, let them know that you mean a lot to me, you have so much to give to this world, to basically continue to offer a supportive environment at home. And of course, as family members, to also ensure that you're taking care of your own mental well-being at that point in time.
And lastly, there's the question, how do we help someone when they have no hope or will to try?
Right. So this is something which, again, is very commonly seen when a person is experiencing suicidal thoughts. It's very hard for them to see alternative solutions or that there is a way out. And I think the only way in a space like this is to remind them that, there is always something that is there, you do mean something to someone, or you do have something to give to this world. And it may be very difficult for them to see it at that point in time, but of course continue to encourage them and offer your support in whatever way that is possible for you. So continue to be there for them, remind them that you're around, and know that they will take their time, and it's not easy for them to you know um, see hope in a situation like this, but remind them that there is hope, that they have so much more to give to this world, that they do mean something to someone. So that is something you can continue doing.
Thanks, Sachi. Thank you for such a wonderful session. I think you answered a lot of questions that many of us are often afraid to ask, especially around suicide. It's one of the largest reasons for why we organize awareness events like these is because suicide is so often shrouded in silence and stigma. we think the myth that we think is, okay, if I ask someone, have you been thinking about suicide, we might plant that idea into their brain. Or when we do know or see someone struggling, even then we are afraid to ask that question. So the point I was going to make is that I think the main awareness that we also need to create about suicide is that it is definitely preventable. There are often many signs that we would be able to pick up. It's obviously understandable that most of us are not trained to do so. We don't know when someone who's close to us might be expressing signs of suicide, and we are not able to support them in that time. Uh, Definitely, awareness and support structures need a lot of more work. And therefore, we do hope that when there are people in distress, at least we for ourselves know how we can support ourselves when we are feeling suicidal, or when we know someone, or when we are seeing someone who is close to us struggling as well. So information about crisis helplines, information about even if we, I, so just to say that I don't think it's possible for all of us to be suicide crisis supporters at all. It's a large burden for someone to take on themselves as well. But even having the information that, okay, these are 5 crisis helplines that I know, and I encourage you to call them. If you are feeling this way, there is support available and there is help. That itself is a large amount of, uh, that itself is can make a lot of difference to someone who's struggling. One more question. What to do when someone believes they don't deserve a chance? These are all very similar
Very
questions.
similar. But something which, again, yeah, of course, something which I think a lot of times when people are in a state like this, they tend to feel like they are a burden, and that they don't deserve a chance, or, so these are very common thoughts that people in a state like do experience. And of course, as a friend, or you can continue to offer your support, but really encourage them to get help, whether that's seeing a professional, to really understand where these thoughts are coming from, navigate, work through these thoughts. But of course, whatever you can do is to offer your support in whatever way is possible for you. Just, letting them know that sometimes people are also hesitant to reach out to a professional. They tend to do it alone. So maybe you might want to encourage them, or, be there when they're reaching out. So these are small things in which you can support them, and continue to remind them that they do deserve a chance, that they have so much more to give to this world. They will take their time to come to terms with it, accept it. It can be really hard for them to see that this is how it is, but give it time, and of course encourage them to get help, reach out, um, and then work through where these thoughts and feelings are coming from.
I just wanted to check, do you want to speak? In that case, I'll just allow you speaking access, and then you can unmute yourself. Yeah, Ipsita, you should be able to speak now. Otherwise, you could always type in your question into the Q&A. We are actually encouraging people to type into Q&A, because that keeps a repository of all the questions that people have asked, and people can refer back to which questions have already been answered. We can't hear you. Even I can see you are unmuted, but can't hear you. All right. In case anyone else has any questions for Sachi, please feel free to ask those. Now we do have some more time. If not, we are happy to close early as well and move towards the next session. Sachi, would you like us to? I mean, if there are questions later on, we can always redirect them to you.
Sure, that works as well.
And if you would like to share your email ID, people could write to you directly as well.
I'll just do that.
Okay, thanks so much, Sachi. So Sachi's email is here. If anyone has any questions or wants to connect with her directly after the session, please feel free to do so. You can also see the work that Sisters Living Works does on the website, where they organize group supports, listening circles, I think weekly, bi-weekly.
Yeah, so we have 3 support groups which happen every month, and 2 of these support groups are just for like emotional distress, just mental well-being in general. And one of these support groups is for survivors of suicide loss. So you can reach out to us, and these support groups are free of cost. They're open to everyone. So in case you think you would like to, access any of these sessions, you can write to me, and we can help you get connected. So I've also shared a link to our website in case you'd like to check out more about the work we do and connect with us later.
And Divya, sorry, this last question, I think what I've missed out here, I'll add that in as well. There are a number of, there aren't many 24/7 suicide crisis helplines. Crisis helplines often have different time periods depending on when their staff are available. But the ASRA helpline is definitely available 24/7. We'll include that phone number here. The KIRAN helpline is also available 24/7, and they provide crisis support as well. So do iCall, SNEHA, and Sangath helplines, but they have particular timings throughout their days. Great. Thank you, Sachi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking this. It was really useful. And I think especially around suicide prevention, it's just such a scary topic more often for most of us. We're also not sure what the right response is, what type of questions to ask, and what are support services available as well. Another question here. Are there similar support groups for people who are contemplating suicide, for people who are experiencing suicidal distress?
So you can definitely there are like mental well-being support groups. So we do have support groups where we've had people who have probably had suicidal ideation in the past, but of course it's always so I just like to put it out that a support group in no way is a substitute for a mental health professional or any kind of a healthcare provider. So this is just a space where you can come, you can share freely, openly. It's a non-judgmental, safe space for you to just come and talk about whatever you're dealing with. It's always suggested, if you have been contemplating or if someone you know has been contemplating, it's best to reach out to your healthcare provider. So a support group is not a substitute, but of course we're always open for people to come and share whatever they'd like to. So we've had instances where we do have members who may have in the past at some point thought about suicide, or may have experienced ideation, but they're also seeking therapy at the same time. So you definitely can sign up for our support group, but of course always suggested that you do also reach out to a mental health professional at the same time.
Thank you. Thanks, Sachi. Great. We are happy to close now. Thanks, Sachi, for taking out the time. We'll be in touch with you shortly as well. For the rest of us, just wanted to share that the next session is actually going to start at 6. So we have about an hour of break for everyone to just regroup, take a break, and then come back rejuvenated for the last session. We'll have a number of sessions quite back to back after this. So at 6 p.m. we will have At 6 p.m. we have a workshop that is being led by Avinash Kumar from the Quicksand Design Studio, along with Deepti Sharma and Sakib Ghasai, who are also the curators for the art exhibition that you saw earlier today. Later in the evening, after Avinash's workshop, you would have a 30-minute guided mindfulness session, which will be led by Dr. Eleanor Hodgson. And this 30-minute activity is mainly focused at releasing and de-stressing ourselves as well after the long day that we have had. And finally, at 7:30 p.m., we have Dr. Vikram Patel going to be speaking to us on the importance of sharing our stories for mental health impact. So we will see you all at 6 p.m. Please take care and come back at 6.